right. Hello and welcome to the Feminine Frequency podcast. Today I'm here with Natalia Dunne, who is a spiritual mentor for women looking to reconnect with their feminine energy. I'm so excited to speak with you today, Natalia.
Oh my goodness, so am I. I'm really honored to be here today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Now, Natalia is in France and I'm here in the US. So for me, the sun is just coming up. It's about 6 in the morning. I'm so glad we can make this happen. And can you remind me again where in France you are located?
Yes, I'm in the southwest of France. So if you want, like around Toulouse area, but this is also
Ah,
the Mary Magdalene and the Cathars and anything that is connected to the ancient mysteries of Mary Magdalene, that's really the spot.
wow, that is just so cool. And how long have you been there?
It's been about 5 years. I used to live in Canada for
Mhm.
probably like almost 30 years. And so, yeah, it's been 5 years. I felt the call to move to France. And, it's a very magical way I ended up being in France. So one time I was meditating and I felt like this really strong call from the goddess to move to France and to follow the steps of Mary Magdalene. And I was like, who? Who on earth is Mary Magdalene? I have no idea. And
Really?
like diving deeper into this, she's like, you have to move to France and follow her steps. And I'm like, how on earth am I going to move from Canada, take my kids, my husband? What am I going to do in France? And then all of a sudden, my husband, he calls me from work and he's like, Nat, this job just opened in France. Should I
Wow.
have? And I was like, oh my God, yes, yes. And so he just applied, and in 2 months, not even, they were like, can you be there? It was in June. They were like, can you be there in September? And he's like, are we moving to France? I'm like, yes, we have to move to France. That's the message I received. And it was right in the land where Mary Magdalene, there was so much lineage and so much history of her. And we just moved there. And since then, I've been exploring the sacred feminine and the feminine energy and the mythos of Mary Magdalene and the Black Madonnas and everything that is connected to that. So the magical story of me in France.
Yes, I love that story. That is so amazing. Now, had you been like studying at all the sacred feminine before this time that you got this call?
I was not specifically studying it. It was more like I was always very connected to the spiritual realm. And especially when I was 19, both of my parents passed away in a car accident. And so for me, it was very deep initiation into, first of all, connecting to the spiritual, because that, like, when something like that huge happens, you kind of question everything in your life and you re-examine everything in your life, right?
Mm.
And I truly believe it was a soul pact and a soul contract, because that really catapulted me into like this deep spiritual search, and also understanding, okay, well, if this source of unconditional love, which I think parents hold if they're really able to tap into this, because I think they kind of hold this frequency of unconditional love for the children so they can experience this. If
Mhm.
all of a sudden the physical source of this is removed, for me that was like such a deep journey of like reconnecting to that unconditional love, but outside of like a physical person giving it to me. And so that has been my path. And so I was always very connected to, like, I was doing a lot of soul searching and journey, and I was exploring a lot of the spiritual and connecting to the spiritual. And that's like a whole other story we can talk to, because oh my goodness, my parents kept coming to me in dreams, they kept coming to me in spirit form. Like, it really opened a lot of, deep connection to the spiritual. But it was not specifically goddess. And then it's only maybe about, like, I would say 6, 7 years ago, I started feeling like this connection to a very feminine energy. And, it was like a lot of synchronicities and winks of like, oh, here I am. And like, it's maybe a post on Facebook that would pop up, or somebody would give me a book, or something I would hear. Like, it was like those little, the way I love to see it, it's almost like she's leaving you little rose petals to follow. And she's like, oh, here's one. Oh, here's another one. Go explore.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like how I started like studying her. It's more about her coming and initiating things, and, you know, allowing herself to be unveiled through different synchronicities in my life. And then when I moved to France, I really consciously starting diving deeper into her mythos, into her story, into, um energetic practices of the goddess. Like I did a lot of mystery schools. Went on many retreats with the spiritual, and now like that's kind of the magic I want to bring into the spaces that I create now. But yeah, it's been all, like I would say consciously really studying her was like the past 5 years.
Wow. Oh my goodness. You have such an amazing story. And
Mm.
wow, it's powerful about your parents and that I didn't know that piece. So
Oh,
that is quite profound.
it
And
is.
sorry
It,
for that, of course. That's an incredible loss to move through, but to have that spiritual connection, like you said, it was a soul contract and maybe, sometimes when people pass, we can even feel closer to them because they're like just sort of everywhere in that spirit realm. So that's really beautiful.
I think it really taught me a lot of things. I don't think I would have maybe allowed myself to go as deep spiritually and to really allow myself to be truly myself and speak my truth and explore the paths that really interest me if they were still around, because maybe I would still be a little bit into, well, I don't know, I'm just like rationalizing this, maybe like into people's pleasing, or like trying to fit into the mold of what my parents would have expected of me. But now them not being there, it kind of like I had no authority figure at such young age of like, you're, I would say, teenager, and it's like go adult, and nobody's there to tell you what to do. And it's like, wow, I really had to find my truth, like my authentic voice through this. And I think this created the spaciousness for me to do so. But I still feel so deeply connected to them and so guided by them on so many levels. Like one example that like it's so concrete, before I got pregnant with my daughter, I didn't even know I was pregnant. Like maybe 3, 4 weeks before I found out, I had a very vivid dream of my dad coming through, and he came to me in the dream, and he was holding a baby girl. She was so precious, like a little baby, and he's like, "She's coming." He's like, "But it's a secret. Don't tell anyone yet. She's coming." And then like maybe 3, 4 weeks later, I find out I'm pregnant, and I'm like, "Oh, I already know who it is. It's gonna be a girl. I saw her." Like my dad. And there's so
Uh,
many that I have, because I think my initiation with the feminine started way before I even rationally understood it was the feminine. Because to
mhm.
me, ability to connect to the spirit world, ability to communicate with the spirit world, our oracular nature, I think this is the deep feminine. And we were so disconnected with that. And so I feel like I was already training in a way and like walking this path through the connection with the spiritual way before like I rationally, my human was like, oh, that's the spiritual. I can now put it in a box and call it.
Yeah.
I feel like I was, yeah, I was like trained by life on this path for a long time. So it's our
Yeah.
connection. And also, something we in the Western world we really disconnected with is like the life and death cycles, right? Like we are birthed, and then we birth ourselves out of there. But it's all cycles. Like we come, we live, we die, and having um being okay with it as much as possible. I don't think we're taught that. And I think like this was again, my whole life was kind of like a preparation of like, okay, are you able to hold space for death also, like the end of cycles, and not just maybe a physical form of like humans, but also in other aspects of our lives as well. Like where are we not allowing things to die, and a new spiral to begin? Because sometimes for something new to be born, we need to let something all pass away. And sometimes we're like in this, especially in the Western country countries, I feel like we're so not prepared to hold spaciousness for like the cycles, the spiral of the feminine, which is birth and destruction, birth and destruction, birth and destruction. And yes, I feel like I had like a very strong life preparation for those, being able to hold space for those cycles.
Absolutely. It feels like it, probably opened you up to
Mm.
that, multidimensional nature of life and death and yeah, and all the things. And I know like with motherhood too, that's just another example, right, of how, you know, this conversation of life and death, there is something related to the feminine there because, we do have, as women, we have that role of bringing life into the earthly realm. And I know for me, having 3 kids, that has been a very spiritual experience for me each time with my pregnancy and the births of my children. And I remember reading a book, I think it was around the time I was pregnant with my second child, that was all about, it was called like Beyond the Veil or Behind the Veil or something like that.
Mhm.
And it was about how through childbirth and pregnancy, we can really like the veil thins and
Wow.
it's like easier to connect with the spiritual realm because we're in the process of bringing new life through the veil. So, and the same thing can be said about death too. So those are very like very spiritual times in our life. And until
Mhm.
that point in my life, I hadn't realized that. Like until I had that experience, hadn't really thought about it that way. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think we've sort of been disconnected from, the spiritual nature of those, you know, important parts of our life.
100%. And you know, they're such an intricate part of being human, right? It's so integral to the humanity, and yet for some reason we were only able to hold space for like one polarity but not the other polarity. And I think reconnecting with our feminine and understanding the depth of the disconnect collectively from the feminine, it's not just like, oh, you're like, a lot of women I work with sometimes are like, oh, feminine is like I need to wear dresses and put makeup. Like that is really not the feminine, right? I mean, it's maybe a little, like a tiny little part of the feminine if you want to look at like, adorning our body and inviting this frequency of beauty and just like not just a minimal survival functional minimalism, which is like
Yeah.
more frequency, but like, ooh, can I adorn myself? Can I be in pleasure? Can I like, what can I do with this body temple? Like that's also like it's a little part of the feminine, but there is so much more. Like, and it's connecting to the cyclical nature of life itself, of our own souls. Like we incarnate and then when we disincarnate, right? Like it's a cycle. Um,
Mhm.
Connecting to our spiritual side. So many women I work with are so afraid of stepping into their spirituality. Like I call it the spiritual closet. It's like, I'm spiritual, but nobody's allowed to know. And I'm
Yeah.
gonna do little rituals hiding, and so that my husband doesn't find out, so that my partner doesn't find out. I can't show that to my kids, and so like again, because we're so afraid of being judged, we're so afraid to be called crazy because we show our spiritual side. But no, it wasn't always like that. Like for the longest time, like there were oracles and there were priestesses, and there were like their wisdom was venerated and their wisdom was valued. And so I think we lost a lot of this connection to the spiritual. And the spiritual we have now in a lot of the Western countries is like more through religion. And I'm not saying one is good or bad. I think both have very, valid and interesting and powerful points. But I feel like in religion, often what happens is you have some kind of like external structure that is in a set of rules, and there is an outside source that is dictating a little bit to you how to go about your spirituality, and you need to follow those rules. So that's like a very masculine concept. And the feminine is like, oh no, I'm going to descend into my body, I'm going to connect to myself, and I'm going to uncover and unveil what is the spiritual, but directly through my own personal experience and through feeling, right? And so this is a very different path and this is a very different experience. And so many women feel afraid, well, women and men, because the feminine energy is in both, like it doesn't matter what
Right.
gender we are, right? And
Yes.
there's the way to go and trust that inner oracle and that inner wisdom and to share it and to speak about it, because like, oh well, if you're not following this masculine structure, then everything else is like you're maybe a bit crazy and out there. So it's one of the
Yeah.
ways we've seen the connect with the feminine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now I know you mentioned before Mary Magdalene, and that's definitely a big influence on she's a big influence on your work. And for anyone that's not familiar with Mary Magdalene, um, can you tell us a little bit about why or how she's been influencing your work and how you bring her into what you do? Because you do retreats, right?
Yes.
You hold different containers for women. Go
Yeah,
ahead. Yeah.
absolutely. Thank you for asking this question.
Yeah.
Well, to me, the way I see Mary Magdalene, I think she's a beautiful archetypal energy that really comes to awaken um, a lot of women into the spiritual sovereignty. And so what I mean by that, okay, besides the fact that like in southern France, there is so much of her history that, having lived in Canada and like in, the American continent, we just really don't know and nobody speaks about it. It's just not part of the culture. But here in the southern France, there is so much of her mythos and so much of her story, because there is, I really, really believed that she truly existed as a person, and she did travel to France afterwards, because there is just like an overwhelming amount of documentation, of information, of places, of churches, of temples like dedicated to her. So besides that, I think there is like a part of the story that we were never told, and um, if we just base ourselves off what is included in the Bible, the canonical text, there is a few mentions of her, like very, small ones. And like Pope Gregory, I think it was like around 500 after Christ, that he said she was a prostitute. And
Mm-hmm.
it, it was not. And so myth, this, defamation, if you want, by the church, held on for like over 1,000 years, right? Like, and it's only in 1969 that the Vatican officially admitted that this was, kind of, they misinterpreted the text. So like, okay, for over 1,000 years, you could not have corrected this. To me, that sounds like a bit of an agenda, but um, and then it's only in 2017 that the Vatican officially called her the Apostle of Apostles. So, her story is slowly, slowly, it took like, again, over a millennia for her story to be heard and her legacy to be, kind of starting to be brought up to the light. And I think there is only so much that the Vatican can push down somebody and like not reveal, because there's other sources coming to light that's like, um, her story was not a complete story, you know? And so
Yeah.
when we're exploring like the other texts that are not the apocryphal text, not the canonical text, there is a whole different story about her. She is portrayed in a completely different light, and you see her as a very sovereign woman with a lot of influence, with a lot of power, who also, went and taught, and she was seen as a teacher as well, right? She had her own community, and she has she's not this, sinful woman who was a prostitute, right? Like, she is really a very powerful woman in her own right. And so I think she kind of comes to help us reclaim the feminine, because if you look at, the Western society and through the patriarchal religions, there was not no space for women, right? Like, they were not really present in the story. And so what that does on the collective psyche is it kind of, even if we don't realize, subconsciously we internalize the story that we don't have sovereignty in the spiritual realm, that we need some kind of male authority to tell us how to be spiritual. And so I think that her archetypal figure comes in to kind of awaken women to their own spiritual sovereignty. And this is more like from the very rational, if you want, but I think on the spiritual level, she also comes to awaken women who are very connected to the feminine, because every single woman I talk to, she magically shows up in their lives. Like, to me, it was through this, through meditation, when I heard the goddess say, go follow Mary Magdalene. I was like, who? Mary Magdalene? I don't know who that is. Okay. And
Yeah.
every single woman I talked to, and I talked to like hundreds of women, she just magically appeared. Like, I had one woman I spoke to, she was in Australia. She found beads connected to Mary Magdalene in the middle of the desert. Another one had a dream of her. Like, she just comes to awaken the consciousness of women, so that we can help rise the feminine again, like back to, not to be above the masculine. I think they're like holy sacred partners, but just, to bring her to the same level. So that's the way I see Mary Magdalene, and that's the way I love working with her, this beautiful archetypal power, but also through learning about her as a human and her story and her legacy as well.
I love that. Holy partners. That's
Oh yeah.
beautiful.
Yes.
Yes. And I know, that unfortunate myth really just, it still persists even with the admission of the Vatican, right? It's like, even until a few years ago, I was like, oh yeah, Mary Magdalene, she was a prostitute.
Yeah.
That's what I believe. That's what I had heard. But
Same. Here.
for me, I read Mary Magdalene Revealed, and that was just a complete game changer. That showed me this other story, this alternate narrative, and the fact that she had gospels that were lost, and they really did hold this sacred feminine way of looking at things, like you were saying, like that we can look within, that we can trust our intuition, that we don't need, a middle person to connect with the divine, to connect with our spirituality, which was pretty just amazing to see that other point of view. And I know Megan Watterson, the author of that book, she is a Harvard theologian, and she said, if this was the version of Christianity that I had been taught, I would be Christian.
Uh, that book is really powerful, and I really recommend anyone, who's remotely interested to maybe start with this book. I think it's so complete and so beautifully researched and written that in itself, I think it's going to be like a bit of a, you know, opening new perspectives to things
Right.
we were not, generally speaking. But yes, absolutely. So I think, yeah, she really comes to awaken us and give us like maybe an example of a figure of authority, but coming from this feminine space, which for millennia didn't really exist in the Western world. And it's very beautiful to what it can awaken within us as well, and to realize maybe all the spaces where we are still holding programs where we're not giving ourselves permission to trust ourselves and to permission to stand in our own sovereignty and in our own power, and to realize that like um we hold a lot of wisdom. Every single human has a lot of wisdom, but we just very often don't trust it, and we think that we need permission from somebody else outside. And I think her story really comes to show us the path to lead with courage and to lead with our like connect to our own sovereignty as well in this aspect. So absolutely.
Yes, yes. And so I would love to hear more about your work specifically, what you offer, and maybe how people can find you, and yeah, just a little more about what you're doing there in the
Uh,
South.
Thank you for asking. So I have two things that I mainly work on with women. So, number one, I really love doing body reconnection sessions, because I really think the feminine path is the path through the body. So, we have the masculine spirituality, which is like, okay, we're going to sit down and we're going to meditate and we're going to be in our heads and we're going to transcend this body to kind of like reach the divine and reach, enlightenment or whatever word you want to put on it. And I think this is a very powerful, path, and I've done that path as well. However, the feminine path, and again, we don't see that so much because for so long we've been in this masculine way. The
Mhm.
feminine way is to descend. So it doesn't go up, it goes down. So it descends into the body and it reconnects with the body. And I think our bodies are like the most profound and the most beautiful mystery schools you can ever imagine. I think everything is stored in our body. We store information about the traumas as generational cycles. We store so many programs in our bodies, and so it's by the thing is that like most of the time we're so programmed to be in our mind and to be thinking forward, thinking outside, thinking okay, what else needs to be done in the outside world, and then relating to ourselves through the perception of people outside. So everything is like outside focused in our head and forward facing and like future facing or past facing, but we're not often present in our mind, in our bodies, and we don't descend to just be. And the feminine is not about doing something in the future, projecting somewhere. It's like, okay, how can I be in this moment? How can I receive this moment? How can I receive this body? What does my body tell me? And so, a very profound experience, I think, helping women create this safety to descend into their bodies and to connect to their bodies and see what is stored in their bodies. And I love doing that with women. So I do this one on one when we really connect and we descend into the body and we explore what is our soul mission with this body, because I don't think the body is just like randomly there. I think our soul consciously chose this specific body to incarnate in, and there is like a like a soul contract with it, like a mission of what is this body there to help us accomplish in this life? What is it there to help us like expand our soul into? And so we explore, we open this line of communication because your body wants to talk to you. Like if you take the time to listen, it's like, I have so many things I want to share with you and tell you. We just never create the spaciousness for it. And so this is what I do with women one-on-one. When we really go down, we descend into the body, we connect to the body, we look maybe at different systems or programs that are no longer serving us that we can maybe start releasing. We explore why we incarnated this specific body. Is there like some kind of karmic, reason, a lesson? And we really reconnect with this deep, unconditional self-love and respect and devotion with the body. So this is like one of the sessions I love doing. I call it the rose body activation session. So
Beautiful.
this, yeah, I love those. And otherwise, I also I have various like little workshops and things here and there that just like pop up spontaneously when I feel the inspiration come through. But the
Yeah.
other big I love with women is the retreats. And so I
Mhm.
usually hold 1 or 2 retreats a year. And in those retreats, we do a lot of rituals of reconnection with the body, reconnection with the sexuality, releasing the shame, releasing, we do a lot of womb healing and releasing, transgenerational trauma we might be carrying. And besides that, I think it's so beautiful to have this space to be held in sisterhood and really witnessed and really seen in deep safety and love and support. And then we also travel, and I share a lot about Mary Magdalene. There is also a beautiful Black Madonna site that I really think is connected to the goddess Isis, because that's a whole other topic we can talk to. But I
Yeah.
think the and like a little whisper and wink to Isis, because with Christianity there was a lot of like you were not allowed to do anything outside of Christianity. So there was a lot of Isis sites in France as well that were brought by Greeks and by Romans. And so, yeah, she still, has those little wings, and I share a lot about that in the retreat as well. And we explore the places that are connected to Mary Magdalene. And what's very interesting is that most of the spaces connected to Mary Magdalene were built on top of more ancient sites and temples that were dedicated to Isis, to Venus, to other deities. I feel like it's the same lineage of the goddess that just comes through different archetypal forms to really awaken and rebalance. And so those places energetically are very, very powerful, because for thousands of years, that's the energy that was anchored there. It was the deep, sacred feminine. And so, like, when you go to those places, you feel incredible activations that I cannot even like explain in words. You have to be there to experience them. And so, learn through mythos, legends. I did so much research on those places. So I really love sharing that, but also to experience. And we do beautiful, ancient, you know, priestess rituals there. We do baptisms, we do anointments, we do, yeah, just a lot of very beautiful sacred work to help women really embody the divine feminine energy. And we also visit a lot of magical water springs. I think again, water is such a connection to the feminine. And yeah, we work with water as well. So lots
Oh
of
my
magic.
goodness. Okay, I have to come visit. Sounds so blissful. Oh my goodness.
So those are my 2 main things I do with women.
Yeah, yeah. Is everything in person for your work?
The retreats are in person, but the body activation sessions, no, I do them online.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. Now,
Easier.
yeah. And I wondered if you could speak to also just like the benefits, like why, like you mentioned self-love, that's a huge one in itself. But what would you say is what draws women to this work and what can they expect to, get from it?
Mm. Well, I think there's a lot of different aspects, because again, like when you reconnect to the feminine, you reconnect to so many aspects of yourselves. So I think as women, self-love is one of the main pillars I really work with women, because I think everything starts with self-love. And we have been so programmed to value ourselves based on our appearance. And this is, there's like a whole set of historical reasons why this happened. But as women, I think we have incredible pressure of like having to look a certain way to feel valuable, to feel needed, to feel desired. And so it's as if we took our self worth, and we kind of majorly put it into our appearance, into our looks. And then if this is not, reflected by society for some reason, we end up really going into cycles of self-criticism, of self-doubt, of not valuing ourselves, right? And so we need to realize that, like, we are so much bigger than just, a physical appearance. And when we learn to uncouple our worthiness, the sense of worthiness, from external perspective of how others might or might not perceive us, I think this is a very profound path of reclaiming our sovereignty as human beings. Because, let's be honest, like, this body temp so ephemeral.
Oops. Uh-oh.
I don't
All right.
remember.
Okay, we're
So
back.
we're
Yeah.
back. I don't remember. I think I was saying that this body is
Yeah.
very ephemeral, and it doesn't last for long. And so I think it's very futile to kind of attach your self-worthiness to whatever external source. And so a lot of that is like, how was I initially meant to inhabit this body? And I think the original template of inhabiting this body is like through deep devotion and unconditional love, because it's our most valuable, most sacred partner in this lifetime. And so I think once you start doing that, it liberates so much energy and so much freedom to step into authenticity and really create the things you really want to create, because now your energy is not taking with, am I beautiful enough? Who will think what of my appearance? And will I be judged? Because, oh my goodness, if your mind most of the time is busy with trying to micromanage how other people perceive you and what they will think of you,
Mm,
you not have the spaciousness and the energy to create everything your soul came here to create, and to really tap into the magic of this body. And so for me, doing this work and connecting to this unconditional love, and like learning to unapologetically love your body and show up as you, because at the end of the day we can only be ourselves, right? And
right.
so
Right.
I think this is the core of everything. And this is something that I think it was hijacked almost on purpose for women, to disconnect them from their power, so that they constantly worry about their appearances and diminish themselves. So I think it's like the basics of what we need to do as especially as women, because our self-worth has been so tied to our physical appearance for so long.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like our attractiveness, right, for so long, for so many millennia, was actually kind of a life or death situation, because women needed to have a man to survive, for a long, long time. So it literally was like, this is a survival
Yeah,
thing
exactly.
that I need to attract a man.
100%. And the sisterhood one that comes with it as well. And so a lot of, again, descending into the body is realizing where are we still holding those stories, because our body holds those stories and holds those traumas. And it's like working with the body to release those stories, and to be like, okay, I want to anchor something new, I want to bring in a new frequency. I no longer need to hold on to this collective memory and this collective programming, and we can let it go. And I'm safe to let it go, because it's all about safety. And the same thing with sexuality. Like, am I truly allowing my sexuality to flow through me, my sexual energy? Or am I like, still in the performance mode of where I need to perform, or I need to look a certain way? And if we are in our heads, if we're thinking how we look, if we're thinking if we're doing it well, we cannot open ourselves to pleasure. Like, it's impossible. And if we can't open ourselves to pleasure, we have difficulty orgasming. And again, it's all like this, this cycle. So I think about like coming back to our feminine, like what you get from connecting to your body is, again, anchoring those deep levels of unconditional self-love, so that you can create more spaciousness for you to be truly yourself, to allow your, remembering the sacredness of your sexuality, not in a way of like, I need to perform and look a certain way, but like, what does your true sexual nature look like? How does this energy flow through you and express itself through you naturally, right? And so I think, again, it's all about coming back home to ourselves, to our most authentic,
Mhm.
true version of who our soul came here to be. And I think it goes through the feminine. It's being,
Yeah.
it's feeling, it's allowing yourself to truly experience this, right? Not like being this outward projecting mode.
Yes. And as you said earlier, dropping the shame around sexuality and around all the things, like just being yourself unapologetically. Because sexuality too, you know, it's it's a life force. It's your creativity. It's, you know, your eros, you know, and it's so much more than just the sexual act itself. It's, you know, something that kind of it flows through us at all times and animates us. So, you know, it's our passion, it's our inspiration, it's our creativity, all of those things. So, it's like really do need to drop the shame around sexuality and sensuality and pleasure because it's huge. It's a
Yeah.
major part of our lives.
100%, and it's going to mirror everything else in our life, right? Because I think if we are unable to, for example, open ourselves up to receive pleasure, right? Like to really not be in our heads, but like really descend into the body, be like, I'm open to being pleasured. I'm open to receiving this pleasure. It
Mhm.
is almost certain that we will be blocking every other aspect of our life from receiving, right? Because again, it's like, how open are you to receive? And if you have difficulty receiving sexual pleasure, you're most probably going to have difficulty receiving money, receiving compliments, receiving in any other layer. Like, so it will mirror a lot of things. When we work on our sexuality, we work on pretty much every other aspect of our life. It's like if you're not able to speak your desires, like, I desire this in my sexuality, I desire to be pleasured this way. Where else in your life are you not speaking your truth and your authenticity, not claiming your desires, right? And so I think like working with our sexuality is such a powerful, cathartic gateway into sovereignty in every single aspect, every single other aspect of our life.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I really feel it's so interesting how we kind of like all, you know, the women doing this work, like these same kind of codes come through and
Mhm.
and land and resonate, like just the authenticity piece. Like I feel like, you know, if we're hiding any part of ourselves or if we're compromising who we really are, we're really not living into our full potential. It's only when we, you know, can live our most authentic self that we become our most abundant self, that we, you know, become fully actualized as people and human beings. And so, yeah, the authenticity is just like, and again, just so key to
Yeah, thank you.
thriving in this life, you know?
Yeah, for wording it so beautifully, 100%. And if we're not being ourselves, we're also fragmenting ourselves, right? Like we're fragmenting our psyche and we're not standing in our own wholeness. So yeah, a lot of things to come back home to.
Exactly, exactly. Oh my goodness. Well, we've covered a lot of ground, and I want to just wrap up by saying thank you so much for doing this work. I just honor you and I witness you and I respect you so much for just embodying this work so beautifully. And I, for one, can't wait to come visit and
Mm,
see,
thank you
maybe join
so
one of your retreats. It sounds amazing.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for, creating this spaciousness and to hold space so beautifully for me to be able to express myself as well. So, and I really love the work you're creating too. And yeah, thank you so much. And I would love to have you at the retreats if, one day it feels aligned and you feel called.
Amazing. Thank you, Natalia. It was great connecting with you. And for anyone who's interested, is Facebook the best place to connect with you or
Facebook, or I'm mostly on Instagram. Instagram is at unleash underscore the underscore goddess. So unleash the goddess. I'm That's the two places you can find me, Facebook and Instagram.
excellent, excellent. Well, we'll definitely stay connected and thank you again. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.